Hello everyone, I'm Rebecca and welcome back to my sewing room. Today we are going to be making one of the easiest sewing projects that you can possibly make, and particularly, I would argue, the easiest historical costuming project, and that is an 18th century skirt. So specifically, this is going to be an Outlander inspired 18th century skirt, and I basically just mean I'm using plaid fabric. I am going to be staying at a castle this summer at Springfield Castle in Ireland, and we are doing various photo shoots, and one of our photo shoot themes is Outlander. I know, Outlander takes place in Scotland, but that was what we all chose for this somewhat fantastical shoot. And so I need an Outlander costume, and we are going to be starting on that Outlander costume by starting with the skirt, which again is such a good project for beginner sewers because these make up so nice and easily. And I say that because basically it is 2 widths of fabric, and we are going to pleat that together onto a completely adjustable waistband that can be worn by literally anyone of any size, and we're gonna hem it, and that's about all we need to do. Now, luckily this fabric is really nice and wide. It's actually about 62 inches wide, and that is after I cut off this random section that has holes. I got this fabric secondhand, and luckily there don't seem to be any holes within the body of the fabric, but there were holes alongside the edges. So to start off with, we are going to check what length we need for this skirt. 18th century skirts frequently hit about the top of the foot, so we're not going full floor length with this. I am going to put on a bum pad and another additional petticoat, both of which will be worn underneath this, and of course some shoes. Figure out what length I need both in the front and the back. Because of that bum pad, we do tend to need a little bit more length in the back than we do in the front, and then we are going to cut 2 panels the lengths of what we need. One panel is going to be the front, and it's going to stop right around where we would have like side seams or pockets, or in this case pocket slits, because that's what they used in the 18th century. And they had separate pockets that were worn tied around the waist, and they were worn under the skirt, and you access them through your pocket slits. And then we're going to cut another panel for the back piece. Again, this one's probably going to be a little bit longer, but they're going to be relatively close to the same length. Once I have cut those pieces, I'm going to cut off my area that has holes, and I'm probably going to go ahead and serge my sides. If you don't know what serging is, I will show that to you in a few minutes here, but it's a really great way to finish your edges. Not something they would have done in the 18th century because sergers are modern machines, but it does make sewing a lot nicer and a lot neater in my opinion. Now, I am using wool fabric for this. You can use really any fabric you want for a project like this. You could use cotton. There were lots of cotton petticoats. You could use silk if you've got a nice high budget. You could use polyester if you don't have the budget for silk. Obviously, they wouldn't have used polyester, but that is okay. You just want a fabric that has a little bit of a weight to it. So get rid of your chiffons, your charmeuses. This is not the time for that. You want something a little bit more snuggly, or at least a little bit stiffer with more body. So let's go take our measurements and get started. So I may wear a petticoat as short as this. This is actually my Hobbit skirt, but this is coming with me to Ireland as well, and I want everything to do like dual duty. So it may be this that I wear under this anyway, but we are going to go ahead and do some measurements. I'll have to do this in front of the mirror, but I'm just going to show you the places to measure. So you want to take a measurement in your center front, of course, holding it at your natural waistband. Now I am going to be wearing this with stays, but my waist height really doesn't change, and so it doesn't matter that I'm not wearing stays right now, and we can wear this whole skirt without stays. So I'm going to make sure that the tape measure is approximately the top of my foot. Again, I will have to do this in the mirror because I can't see on the monitor what it's doing, but I can feel it at the top of my foot, so it's probably right. And you are going to take that measurement that you see at your waist. Mine is 42.5 because I am quite tall. And then you are going to add 1.5 inches to that. You want 1 inch for your hem and 1/2 inch for your seam allowance at your waist. So mine comes to 44 inches. Then you are going to do the same thing over on your side. Now with all of these, as you are making sure that it's hitting the right place on your foot, obviously don't bend down at the waist like this to check it, or else it will be too short because you're bending over. That's why I recommend doing this in front of a mirror or having a friend help you. My side measurement is 44 inches plus inch and a half equals 45 and a half. Finally, you are also going to do this in the center back. Now I'm already wearing the bum pad right here, so that's giving me a little extra oomph back there. And again, check in the mirror to make sure that you've got it at the same level as the front and the side. And my center back is winding up at 45 inches, so 46 and a half inches total. So as far as cutting your pieces go, that means that if we're just going to cut straight rectangular panels, which is what I recommend doing kind of as your first step here, our back panel needs to be 46 and a half inches long and our front panel needs to be 45 and a half inches long because that is the measurement of the side. You always want to cut it at the longest measurement. We will then kind of even out that hem and scoop it a little bit. In the 18th century, they actually would have done that evening at the waist, but I find that if you're doing this by yourself, it's much easier to take care of that at the hem. So we are going to cut out our two panels. We're going to get rid of any of those holes alongside the edges, and then I'm going to show you what serging is. So I realized with this skirt that because of the plaid on here and the repeat in the plaid, I could actually make it so the top is what is shaped. So I don't know how well you can see this line right here, but basically this piece right here is going to be the back piece. This piece right here is going to be the front piece. They wind up meeting at the same point in a pattern repeat. So in between the two plaids, that's what it means by a pattern repeat. And so this will be the top, this will be the top, they will be sewn together, and then our plaids will match at the sides, which is perfect. And over here, because our center front is 1.5 inches shorter than the side, which is 1.5 inches shorter than the center back, we are actually able to just flip this and use this as the exact same pattern repeat. So hopefully that makes sense to you guys, but basically both of these will be the top of the skirt, and we had a nice sort of semi-curve here, and then we'll have a flat, even plaid at the bottom at the hem. This hides a little bit by the bottom of the bodice, so we don't have to worry about seeing a little bit of extra plaid here or a little bit less here, and that way the hem will look super nice and even. Just a quick note, I realized a moment ago that I told you that it was a 1.5 inch difference between the side versus both the center front and the center back. According to my measurements, actually, it's a smaller difference between the side and the center back. It's only 1 inch. So I'm going to kind of ease that down just a little bit so it's not so much of a difference there in the back, and that will level out our hem. So now that we have our two pieces cut, it is time to pleat the tops of these pieces. I find that it's easier to pleat them separately before we actually sew the two pieces together, and we are going to knife pleat these. It doesn't really matter if you fully finish the edges either, because we're actually going to encase this in bias tape. That is my preferred method, my preferred tape that I use. You can use other types of tape as well, like a wider twill tape, but I do find that just using store-bought bias tape, double fold bias tape, is the easiest way to do this. So I'm going to be using the Dritz extra wide double fold. Looks like this, and basically the top of our fabric is going to get encased into that, and it's going to be folded over like this and then stitched into place. And so with the fabric, we are going to knife pleat this to just slightly more than half of your waist size. You want a tiny bit of overlap between the front and the back by like about 1 inch or so, but that's it. So for me personally, for a 40-inch waist, that means that I want this front piece to be 21 inches. Now personally, I eyeball my pleats, but for something like this, we are basically going from 60 inches down to approximately 20. So we can pretty much do a standard pleat, which means that the pleat depth is like the same on both top and bottom. And the nice thing about working with a plaid is that you can use the stripes on the plaid to determine where your pleats are. So if you want to do 1 inch pleats with this, you can just measure what that looks like on the plaid. I tend to prefer to start from the center. So we're starting with the center back right here. And we are going to start by pleating towards the center. So that means that the edge of the pleat here is at the center. This plaid actually doesn't really have a very geometric repeat, like 1 inch doesn't really mean anything on here. So I'm going to pay more attention to the pattern repeat of the plaid and pleat that into place and pin it into place. And then you move on to the next one. You can, of course, mark these pleats if you prefer, but I'm just eyeballing. All of the pleats are now pressed into place. I just press about like the top 3 or so inches in place. The rest of it can kind of be free. And now we're going to go ahead and baste over our pleats on the sewing machine. And then we can fold the bias tape over the top edge of this and it will be secured into place. And we'll do that on both sides. I realized I didn't show you what serging was. So this is a serger and we are using this to overcast our raw edge that we had to cut off because of the holes. So prepare for noise. This is a blade and that cuts off the edge or the fray of the fabric. So you can see we've got some fray going on around here. And that cuts it right off. And then what it produces is this nice finished edge. It's hard to see with the black on the navy, but it's giving a nice finished edge here that is not going to unravel. For your bias tape ties, you want to go with enough that you can tie it around your full waist. So if you are doing from the back, you want it to tie all the way around to the front. Give yourself enough room to make a little bow in the front, and then you can cut off the excess. For the front, you may find that instead of going front to back and tying in the back, you might want it to actually loop all the way around and tie in the front again. Depends on how comfortable you are with tying behind your back. If you're comfortable with it, you are more than welcome to do that. If it's not easy for you to do, you can use a longer strip of bias tape and bring it all the way back around to the front again. I'm a little bit short on bias tape, so I am going to just go ahead and tie the back panel in the front and the front panel in the back. The tops of my skirt panels are now basted into place, which if you're not familiar with basting, it is just a long length stitch on the sewing machine, one that you don't necessarily have to tie off on the ends. And so now I'm going to go ahead and apply my bias tape strip. What I have already done with this strip is I have actually folded in the end, so it's a nice finished end. And what we're now going to do is we're going to fold it in half and find the center of this tape. Mark that. You can mark it with a pin or a pen, and you are going to line that up with the center of your skirt panel. Once you have lined up your centers, go ahead and fold your bias tape over both sides of the top edge of the pleats and pin that in place. We don't really have to pin the tie part to itself because it really just stays in place on its own. You can put a pin in the very end if that makes your fold feel more secure, but we are now going to do a zigzag stitch over the entire tie, making sure that we grab the edges in this area here so that it kind of goes just off the edge of the bias tape. And we're going to go all the way through on each tie. And when you are done, it should look like this. Obviously, it goes without saying, this is all a theatrical way to do this. This is not historically accurate. We're using a sewing machine. We're doing a zigzag stitch. We're using bias tape. But this is a really great way to finish off the tops of your 18th century pleated skirts. Now we can go ahead and take our two panels and put them right sides together and seam up the sides. You don't want to sew the entire side. You want to leave about 9 inches or so at the top up here that is unsewn, and that's going to allow you to access your pockets through the pocket slit in the side. But the rest of it is going to be all sewn together, and ideally if you are working with a plaid like I am, you want your plaid to match. So you want to be very careful about lining up your pattern, pin that in place, stitch it, and then press that seam, turn it right sides out, and all that's left is the hem. I don't think I mentioned it when I was doing the pleating, but the way that I like to pleat means that all of the pleats face towards the center back. So this is the center front. We see this sort of box pleat right here. And then when we look at the back, we have an inverted box pleat in the center back right here. So let me show you how to put on this skirt. I tend to always prefer to start with the back, and that is just going to tie here. I like to tie mine just slightly off center, but that's just so that I can get a smoother center front. And then we pull up the front and we bring it around to the back or to the front if you made your ties long enough. And we tie this part in the back. And then if you don't have a long enough peplum on your bodice, you can tuck this bow into the inside of the skirt. So now I just need to check my hem, make sure that my hem is actually even all the way around. And at that point I can then fold an even hem, 1/2 inch fold, then 1/2 inch fold again. And I like to hand sew that into place because I feel like it looks nicer from the outside. But if you feel like it, you can machine sew that instead. So I did a whip stitch for the entire hem. Hopefully you can see some of the stitches there without it getting too blurry, but I did all of this today at a crafting day with my friends, and that means that our skirt is now complete. Now I don't have a full reveal for you on this project yet because this is just one element of my Outlander costume that I'm going to be working on. So next week we are going to pick up with making the bodice to go along with this, and then there will be a final reveal all at the end with the full Outlander costume. So definitely make sure you check back next week and hit subscribe. And that's gonna be it for this video. Hopefully you liked it. Hopefully it was helpful to you. If you have not been sewing in the past, hopefully this video inspires you to get sewing because it really can be that easy. And in my opinion, this is definitely the easiest historical costuming project that you can start with. Don't even worry about doing it out of plaid and matching plaid. You can do this out of plain fabric. And really, this is such a great jumping off point to get into historical costuming and cosplay. So anyway, if you enjoyed this video, please go ahead and click the thumbs up icon. And like I said, if you'd like to see more videos like this from me, please go ahead and click subscribe and the little bell icon to be notified every time I post a new video. I do post videos here on YouTube at least once a week, usually with sewing vlogs like this out on Tuesdays, and sometimes with additional costuming related content or shorts out on Saturdays, but I post every day over on my Instagram, so please go follow me on Instagram. That's at Lady Rebecca Fashions. And if you'd like to help support all of the work that I do on this channel, I do have a link to my Patreon and my Ko-fi down in the description below, or you can send me a super thanks or join my YouTube channel memberships right here on YouTube below the video. I'd also like to give a special shout out to my Edwardian level patrons, Jean and Kim. Thank you all so much for joining me today. I hope you all have a wonderful week, and I will see you very soon in my next video. Happy sewing!